All right, welcome listeners to the Tennis.com podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Nina Pantic, joined in the Lake Nona USTA National Campus studio with my co-host, Irina Falcone.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And our guest for this episode, Richard Ashby. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Richard works here at the USTA National Campus. Richard, tell us a little brief bio about yourself.
Well, been working for the USTA for 16 years. Before that, coached on my own a little bit privately with pros and juniors, worked in some academies before that. And so that's my coaching background. Played junior tennis, played college tennis at the University of South Carolina. That's basically my playing background. Played a little bit of pro after college, but not that successful, so moved on to coaching.
That's relatable. So what age group are you targeting right now? Do you work with a specific group?
Yes, work with the 14 under girls here at the national campus. So we bring in kids for camps primarily, camps training weeks. We don't do a lot of traveling with kids that age. We don't have them come in for long periods of time. They usually come in for a week or 2 weeks of training. And we work with their coaches. So we get the information back to the coaches, things that we worked on here, things that we see. We go to tournaments, have a chance to watch them play there, and hopefully see them improving on things, have a chance to talk to their coaches about things we're seeing. It's always a lot easier, when it's, live where you're watching something and talking with a coach. So at the tournaments, it's a great opportunity to do that, meet up with coaches.
So you've been working with the USTA for 16 years. Have you been with the girls 14 and under age every single year? No,
started 2003. So that first year and the next year I worked primarily with junior pros, so kids basically 16 to 18, and did that for a couple of years. And then in 2005 started with the kids born in 1991, that age group. So I worked with an age group for a few years through 2008. Then 2009 I started with 12 and unders. Jay DeLuey is another coach for the USTA, used to work with that age group, and he actually started working with kids older. So I essentially switched places with him. So from 2009, it started with 12 and unders, and it's kind of grown to 13 and then 14, and been 14 under for the last few years.
Can we do some name dropping? What are some players you've worked with? I know Amanda Anisimova was Sloane Stephens one, Kenin, Cici Bellis, Irina Falcone.
Yeah, so all those players. Very fortunate. When we moved to Boca, it was a good location. We had a lot of good players in the area. So players would come through and practice. We were able to set up a program where their younger players were able to come out and, not every day. Amanda, at first came out like once a week when she was younger. Always worked with, her dad was her coach, so worked with her. Same with Sonia. And we actually had a pretty good setup there where they'd a lot of times in the morning do drilling and then in the afternoons do match play, and we'd be able to have kids kind of all levels, sometimes older kids coming out in the afternoons. But Amanda and Sonia, were kids that did that from pretty much the beginning. Sloane, I've done very little with her. I mean, it's mostly been camps or, a little bit of training. And let's see who else has been out of there. Irina Falcone for sure was there. So when I worked with the 91 group, so Irina would come and play matches. Actually, was telling Irina, like the first camp I did when we were in Key Biscayne, Irina was actually in the camp along with Ali Risk.
Mallory Burdett and Madison Brangle.
There you go. So bunch of kids that have, moved on to play pros, which is great. So that's one of the things I'm fortunate I get to work with kids that are the best kids in the country. So, a lot of them are going to be successful. So
I was actually mentioning that to Cece the other day. We were watching you practice with one of the girls. I can't remember her name, but she was pretty good. And I made a comment to Cece. I was like, "Did you work with Coach Richard?" And she's like, "Yeah, I did." And I was like, "That's unbelievable." When I believe it was 13 or something, I was still living in New York, and I get this letter from the USTA. Do you want to do this camp at Key Biscayne? And sure enough, it was with Allison Risk, Madison Brangle, and Mallory Burdett, whom all are top 70, have been top 70 players. It's not very common for a coach to be able to have that much of an impact on so many players that end up being professional. What is it that you have that makes that possible?
Again, I don't know how much it is me. It's definitely a good system where we get a chance to see younger players at an early age. Like Cece, I remember the first camp she came to, she was not the best one there. She was maybe in the middle of the pack. She had some of the similar things she has now, just the excitement that she always brings to the court and everything. So that hasn't changed. She's just gotten better as it's gone along. So, to be honest, I enjoy helping the kids, and if anything, I try as much as possible for them to enjoy it as well, and to try to guide them, I guess, for a game for the future. Now, that's up to them to apply all those things, but most of those kids, like I say, were good when they got there, and they've gotten better as they've gone along, moved on to other coaches and everything. So. Yeah.
We've named a lot of successful, pretty popular names, big names that have come through the Ashby system. For all those players, though, that you worked with that didn't make it, can you tell the difference between someone like an Anisimova and a Kenin? Can you see that early on that, hey, this kid's got something different? Or is it more of quantity and then figuring out one or two that rise to the top?
Yeah, there are many kids that I thought were going to be very, very good and maybe even better than those guys. And they ended up being good tennis players, but not, making it into the pros. So I've learned as I've gone along that I'm not a very good predictor. So I try not to pick, try to just have lots of players coming through as much as possible, and try to, treat them all in a way that this is what you need to do to be great. So they have that chance. Some apply it well. Some are going to be great no matter what we did, but try to treat all the players that come through with the idea that, look at your game now and where do you want to go. If you want to be a pro, then these are the things you need to address. And, fortunately getting to see them when they're young, 12, 13, 14, they have a chance to, make those adjustments if they can. The ones that came in that maybe I thought were really good and ended up not being so good as far as results, I think that's just how tough the sport is. It's. I remember there's a stat that somebody was saying that basically every year the top 100, it's only 6 jobs available, something like that. Where on the women's side, so you have to be that good that you're going to take someone's job who's 70 in the world, and that's not easy. So many of these guys are good players, but it's just not that easy to actually be a pro.
Irina, can you take us back to those days in that camp? Do you have any memories or things you remember working on or how you felt being a part of that? Because you were based in New York, right? So you weren't even a Florida girl yet. What was that experience like as a young Irina?
It was definitely, I think, not necessarily life-changing, but it was shocking because I thought I knew what I was doing on the court. I trained with my dad for a couple hours a day, didn't know what fitness was. And so I came in with Coach Richard, and I believe, was it Coach Elke at the time?
I think Katie Schlickerbeer, she's since married, but Katie was, I think, pretty much leading the camp. I was helping her with the camp. I don't remember. I think Jada Louie was around a little bit, but I think it was mainly Katie and I, the two leading the camp.
I think that the level of competition was so high, it just was a very cool environment to be in, and all the girls, even at that age, were very professional. Like, we were there to work. It wasn't like, oh, let's socialize and have fun. It was, let's get better, which I think is one of the biggest differences in some of the camps you see today. Like, some girls just go out there, whether it's a tennis camp, whatever sport it is, some people just see it as a social event, and we were there to work. Even though we were very young, that was our whole motive there, and I think Coach Richard had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I think, one thing about that is that's kind of like, you can bring the best kids from around the country, and they all want to do really well, so they all challenge each other in a good way. So everybody's, basically really focused on doing their best and doing the training their best, and that environment, I think, continues here. So, like, we had a camp last week where, the kids came in and, they enjoy working hard because that's the standard. That's kind of good peer pressure. And I think sometimes, some of the kids in some of their environments where they're the best kids, it's almost like they're going down to the level of somebody else because, the group has a lower standard. But, when you get all the best kids together, they raise the standard. So that definitely helps.
So we know Irina made the cut, but how do you select players? How do you know which players you want in these camps, and how are you watching? Is it rankings, results? Do you, I don't know, ask their coaches, their parents? Are you interviewing? How does this come together?
Sure. I think, the main thing I look at is results. So, again, the system we have right now, kids go, when they're, say, 11, 12, they're in sectional camps, and coaches can recommend them from there, meaning like the coaches that work the camps might say, okay, we have, these kids that did really well. And so the younger ones, maybe that haven't played nationals, we haven't had a chance to see them, but, 12s nationals, a lot of kids are playing. So we get a chance to see them there and, inviting them for some of the camps that we have here that are basically from 13 and up for the national camps. And when results kind of give you an idea of, okay, they've been beating these players and going far in the tournaments. Then you see them play and you're trying to match those things up. Obviously a player that's winning all the tournaments, well, it's kind of easy. They deserve to come. Somebody else who's maybe going pretty deep in the tournament but not winning them, you're looking at that, and then you're looking at essentially, do they play good tennis? Do they have good athletic skills? Do they, all intangibles you're kind of looking at with your eyes and matching that up. But results is probably like I said, that's the first thing. And I distinguish that from ranking because, sometimes somebody's ranked really high because they do well in smaller tournaments, but not so well in the nationals. So essentially the results at, the Easter Bowl, National Clays, Nationals, Orange Bowl, those types of tournaments, those are the main results we look at. And then, you're looking to see somebody that maybe is not doing great, but they're really fast, or they have really good strokes, or they play a good style of tennis. You have kids that maybe in the 12s. I remember first time I saw Claire Liu play, she was 10 years old, and she was playing at clay courts, and she's coming into the net, and she comes in, and she'll miss the volley or miss the overhead, and keep coming in, and I remember talking to her mom after. Her mom was, shaking her head. She keeps missing overheads, and but every time she misses one, she's getting better. She's getting one overhead better. And basically a year and a half later, she's winning 12's Orange Bowl. So, and she won that tournament actually coming in and executing. So, again, it's Claire was already good, but, when you see a kid that plays a good style of tennis, that also goes a long way. And, you try to balance that out, results and, up what you think maybe they can do later.
Hey everyone, you're listening to the Tennis.com podcast with special guest coach Richard Ashby. He's telling us about his experiences coaching young players and all the training camps he's coached, including one with our host, Irina Falcone. Keep listening.
So you talked a little bit about the fact that you played college tennis. Did you play all 4 years?
I did, yeah. Back when I was playing, I think there was one guy my age that turned pro instead of going to college. That was Jonathan Cantor. And all the other guys like Rick Leach and guys like that were my age, Richie Rendenberg, those guys were all going to college. I think Richie maybe left a little bit early, but most of the guys played 4 years. But I wasn't anywhere near in that league. It wasn't like any consideration of turning pro or, doing that. I was fortunate. I got to play some pro tournaments from after my second year, so I got to know what it was about, but I wasn't thinking of turning pro.
So my question to you is, when I was playing junior events back in the day and before I decided to go to college, I wouldn't say that the USTA had a thinking as college being like, okay, she didn't make it as a pro, I guess she'll go to college. That's how it felt back in the day. When you went to pro, it was like, when you went to college, it was almost like, all right, I guess you failed. All right, you go to college. Even though you're going to Stanford, UCLA, like it did not matter. Do you feel like that thinking has changed in today's tennis minds at all? Like as a junior, like when they come into your camps, is it still, I want to go pro, I don't want to go to college, or you know what, I want to go to a D1 school and get a full ride somewhere?
Well, I mean, I don't know what all the kids are thinking. I think the majority are thinking that they want to go to college. We certainly look at it as you want to play a little bit higher level all the way through, like, when you can play ITF juniors, you want to do that. When you can play pros, you want to do that. And your results are going to tell you where you are and what decision you should make. And going to college, it's good. When you go there, you've got to make sure that if you want to be a pro and you choose to go to college, you have to go to college with that mindset. I think a lot of kids, and again, sometimes it depends on who's talking to them and giving them a certain message, but the message we want to give them is you want to keep getting better. If you choose to go to college, you want to keep getting better. Now, again, the challenges in college, you sometimes have people who have the mindset you're saying. They've gone there and they've like, okay, I'm not going to go pro, so I'm going to coast through college, which is fine. But if you're trying to be pro, then you have to go into college with a plan for, just like you have a plan for how you want to improve academically, you want to have a plan for how you're going to improve as a tennis player. And one of the best things that's starting to happen is a lot of college coaches are taking players to pro tournaments while they're in school. If somebody comes in and says they want to be a pro, there are lots of coaches out there that know how to help you get there, and they're going to lay out a good pathway, and then it's a good plan. And really, it's up to the player to follow that and to fight a lot of, you're not going to have 8 people on the team that are all thinking they want to be pro. So if you have 6, then you're in a great environment and you guys are all going to push each other. But if you're the only one, then how are you going to fight maybe what the other kid's feeling is? And, that's where, the player has to be determined. And, hopefully the coach and assistant coaches can provide a good environment. But it's definitely been proven that you can be a pro on the female side, even if you go to college. And for some players, it's turned out to be, the best thing. I remember talking with Nicole Gibbs a little bit, and or she was talking to us actually as a group, just our PD staff, her and Bradley Klon, and basically for her, she wasn't ready to go pro in a lot of levels, maturity, game, physically, all those things. And when she was at Stanford, had a plan for how she's going to get stronger, and again, she's going to mature being there in that environment. So college is definitely a part of the pathway. It requires a little more of a challenge than somebody who turns pro at 18, because just the environment,
I mean, you work with players that are a little bit younger than the college age, or the age of having to make that decision. But have you had to work with anyone where you had a discussion, hey, you know what, I don't think maybe pro tennis is the right path for you, or, what you're doing isn't going to get you there and you should consider college? Have you ever had to discuss something that big?
Well, I don't think of it that way. I don't think of college as like a bad choice or college as failure. The way I look at it is all the players they want to get better. So, tell the players all the time, Federer's trying to get better, Djokovic's trying to get better, Serena's trying to get better, Halep's trying to get better. They're all trying to get better. Where you are now, sometimes tell them you're not good, right? You're not good enough, right? So it's not an insult, it's just a fact. So what are you going to do to get better? And it's not that you're not good enough to be pro. There are lots of things the juniors have to improve. And having that focus, if really you're trying to get better, if you're 14 years old and you're worried that you're not going to be a pro, well, you're thinking about the wrong things. You need to be worried about how you're going to get your second serve better, how you're going to get your transition game better, how are you going to move better, all those things. And then, again, the results tell you. If you're 15 years old and you're not being successful in pros, well, it's going to mean that you're going to need to improve X, Y, Z to be successful. And when you go back out the next year when you're 16 and then you're 17, and if you're 17, 18 and not being successful, it tells you that you're not ready to go to the pros, and you need to work on those things in college if that's the path you choose. But I guess I don't look at it that way, that college is not failure. I mean, it's another step, and that's it.
What do you find is one of the challenges when you do have these camps and you have all different ethnicities, cultures? I mean, obviously they're their same age, but maturity, I'm sure, varies with a lot of the girls. What would you say is like your biggest struggle and challenge?
I mean, I've been pretty fortunate that most of the kids get along. There's always a few kids that are a little bit either, they like to be by themselves, or they don't get along with kids in general, so it's not so much the tennis, it's just kind of their personalities. Sometimes you have kids that are just raised in a certain way, or they think in a certain way. But most of the time as the camp goes along, people realize they're all there to get better. And I was telling the group last week, you need the other person to play well for you to be successful. So you need to be able to, you want them to play well, you want them to do well, because if they do that, then it helps you. And, so I've been really fortunate. I can't say that there've been big personality problems in camps that we've had. If we've had that, it's not been that difficult to get them on a working page. Not everybody's going to be best friends, so that I accept and that I know. And, if you have one kid by themselves the whole camp, then that's a problem. But, sometimes you have 3 kids that are hanging out, another 3 that are hanging out. Okay, as long as they're not doing mean things to each other, it works out okay.
The cliques.
Yeah.
Cliques. They start very young, don't they?
Yes.
Hey everyone, we're here today with National Coach Richard Ashby, talking all things Coco golf, what he's excited about for 2020, and all the players that he's helped along the way. Keep listening.
Have you had a moment in your career that you realized, this is where I'm meant to be? Like, this is the right place for me, I've not like I've made it, because players, we ask that, like, when did you know you made it? And like, you're a coach, it's a little bit different. But when did you know, like, this is working, what I'm doing is it's paying off?
Okay, so when I started, like I say, I worked more with pros or younger pros, and I enjoyed that. When I started with a 12 and unders, what I came to realize is that I'm more a teacher than a coach. So with the younger kids, there's a lot more teaching, because they really don't do things well, right? So they're, and they're expecting to learn. Like, they come into it with, like, if you tell them you need to improve your serve, yeah, I know, right? So they're not fighting you. They want to learn. They, want to be taught. So I think pretty much, in 2009, so I used to help Julia Bostrup and Ashley Weinhold, and so 2009, they were playing a pro tournament, and went and I was having lunch with them, and they asked, if I enjoyed working with who I'm working with now more than them, and told them, yeah, I enjoy it more, not because of them, but because I enjoy doing that. I enjoy teaching more. So I guess if there's any moment, then maybe that sometime in 2009.
It's not easy to be in your position and have your job for as long as you've had it. 16 years is a very long time for anything, to be honest. Is there someone that kind of helped you find this path? Did you ever have a mentor before you decided to take this coaching journey?
I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of coaches I worked with that were good coaches when I was playing, and to be around good people. I would say that the person that got me on this path really, Benny Sims was a national coach when I was playing. Like, so last year I was playing a pro tournament. I didn't know him, and I was practicing next to like some national players that he was working with, and so he introduced himself to me, and we just talked a little bit. And then it was maybe 6 months later, after I'd stopped, that he contacted me about going to Saddlebrook to be hitting partner for Jennifer Capriati. And that really, I guess, took me from doing, I don't know what I would have been, I think I would have been teaching tennis. I would have been teaching maybe at an academy or at a tennis club, tennis center. But that took me to where working with, obviously high-level player. I was, hitting partner for her for a little bit. And from that, I was fortunate enough to keep working with higher-level juniors or higher-level pros. And so, Benny definitely provided me a great opportunity by recommending me for that job. I would say probably the coach that taught me to play, Henry Provoto, He spent a lot of time with me individually, more time than he had to, worked with me without charging, all those things that definitely set the tone for, understanding that you try to help somebody and you basically go all in and you put your heart into it. And so he's definitely a good example, and, it's kind of set the tone for, an example for me anyway.
I feel like we also have to talk about a little bit of the Coco mania. She's a little bit older than the players you're working with. She's 15, and I know she worked with her parents or her dad, so not quite the same path as players you've worked with. But when you see a player that age, that young, exploding so majorly on the big screens, what's your thoughts on the Coco mania?
Yeah, I guess I always call her Corey, but it's amazing what she's done. So it's really interesting to see. She obviously has been very, very good, having been very, very successful. But talking to some of the coaches, and they were saying, like, the huge change from French Open, because people don't realize, okay, she played French Open qualies, lost second round, right? People just remember, or people know her from qualifying at Wimbledon, beating Venus, and then that's her story from there. But before that, even when she was in the juniors, she didn't have as much emotional control as she needed. She was a great fighter, but not that emotionally under control. And the fact that she's able to go from the French and really make a huge, huge improvement in her mental skills and the commitment to controlling herself, that's amazing. But it's also a good sign for young kids to know that how important that aspect is for tennis. It's not just about hitting the ball or moving. It's also how you control your mind. And, I think she's definitely a good role model for all ages. And I would say, she's earned everything that she's gotten. I was fortunate to see her when she was maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9 for the first time. And, she's always worked just like she's always worked hard on the court, always fought. The biggest difference is just how much more professional she is with her control of her emotions.
Speaking of professional, I just want to go back to the fact that you were Jennifer Capriati's hitting partner. Anything that you can remember that you really took away from your experience with her that kind of you've kept for the rest of your life that maybe you teach your own kids and in the camps and stuff?
Well, it's pretty amazing, like her concentration. So I met her when she was 13, and so 13, 14, like her concentration was amazing. And the fact that if you're doing something, if it's not that challenging, she's bored. But as soon as it's challenging, or as soon as she's down in the game, she raises her level. And, when you're, looking at players, those are the kind of intangible qualities, the mental side of the game that is hard to know until you see players in situations. But certainly when we're in camps, if we see players that actually love the challenge, like we start keeping score and their level goes up, their focus goes up, that's a good thing. You'd like them to be focused all the time, but you'd rather have good match players than good practice players. So kind of the way her mind was is definitely a good example, and a good, as we look at, as I look at other players, some of the qualities that she has, are qualities kind of look for. I've learned a lot about, all the hype that's around, a really good player when they were young, and understanding that, they need to have good people around them, and they need to have perspective that, tennis is a part of life. And I think that sometimes is a challenge when, you're rewarded for all the success in tennis, and you're not, nobody reprimands you, or nobody, disciplines you when you do things that are, not the right things, and they let it pass because you're such a good tennis player. I think that, people have to keep in mind that tennis is a part of life, and understand that, it's a big part, and when you're on the court, it's maybe the biggest part of that moment, but need to know that, there's more to life than just tennis, and know that, all the players, need to, and people around them need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough lesson that young prodigies are going to be learning, and hopefully someone like Coco Gauff maneuvers her way through all of that. Let's end with one final thought from Richard Ashby. Who should people be excited about in 2020? I mean, people are already excited about Coco and Anisimova, but are there any young players we should maybe be seeing for over the horizon?
I don't know if there's not somebody that's necessarily. Again, nobody was going to say that necessarily about Corey and her results, but I think the kids that did pretty well at the juniors last year are kids that could make that switch to the pros. I don't have one name to look for. I'll say that what I think that Corey actually did to help, and it showed at the U.S. Open that a lot of players that maybe were kind of doing okay realize, hey, I can go big, and I can have that dream that Corey showed everybody. You might as well dream big and go all out. And I think it's going to help a lot of the U.S. players. I think like Christian and Taylor Townsend, their success there at the Open, I think they just had more belief than maybe they'd had before earlier in the summer. So I think there'll be a lot of players that are building off of that.
I love that you call her Corey.
Yeah.
He did say that he's not a good predictor, so you did put him on the spot there.
I put him on the spot. I did. I definitely did. So let's end on that. This has been the Tennis.com podcast, and I've been Nina Pantic, joined by Irina Falcone.
Thanks for listening, you guys, and thank you so much, Coach Richard, for being with us here today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. From the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, this has been the Tennis.com podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay caught up. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every major listening app, as well as tennis.com/podcasts. You can also see the videos of our episodes on Tennis Channel's YouTube page and tennis.com's Facebook page. We're your hosts, Nina Pantic and Irina Falcone. We'd like to thank our team, editor and audio designer and video editor Christina Koseva, producers Alexa March and Sean O'Malley, and executive producers Shelby Coleman, Kyle Einhorn, and Andy Chu.